One cold and rainy evening, when the rails were damp, Henry was puffing home with a heavy goods train. The big engine was tired and most annoyed. The trucks had been silly, heavy and noisy, and he was looking forward to a rest in the nice dry shed. In the distance, he could see a tunnel, and he was relieved the miserable trip was almost over. Then suddenly he started to slow down. Panicking, he tried to go faster as he plunged into the tunnel, but it was no use. He had just reached the other side before he grinded to a halt, with his buffers barely leaving the tunnel. For anyone who knew Henry and his story of the tunnel, long ago in 1923, he stubbornly stopped in this very tunnel and refused to move, afraid that the rain would spoil his lovely green paint and red stripes. They tried pulling him out, but he wouldn't budge. As punishment, the Fat Controller had the tunnel bricked up and told Henry he could stay there for always and always and always. Eventually, a few days later, Henry was let out of the tunnel to help Edward and Gordon, and he no longer feared the rain. But the story never truly left, and it became quite a joke to the other engines. But Henry was defensive whenever the subject was brought up. The driver and the fireman snickered as they walked to the guard's van. Later, the three men returned with some bad news. The silly trucks giggled. They felt pleased with themselves. Henry was upset. The crew tried not to snicker. Instead, they put up red oil lamps and went to telephone for help. Henry grumbled dreadfully. Of all the places he could have broken down, it had to be his tunnel. The silly trucks kept giggling and teasing him. The tunnel's echo was making it worse. But worst of all, other engines kept rushing through the other tunnel. Most of them said nothing, but Henry thought he could hear them snickering. Before long, Emily came to take Henry and his trucks to the yard. Henry was silent and moody all the way home, so Emily thought it would be best not to bother him. That night, Henry's brake pipe had been fixed, and he glumly backed into his shed. Of course, the story of the mishap reached the sheds before he did. Gordon and James agreed with what Stanley said. Suddenly, hiding in the tunnel didn't seem like a bad idea. Henry didn't sleep well either. His mind kept wandering back to the tunnels, the rain, and brick walls. When the morning light crept through his eyelids, Henry couldn't feel his fire burning. But as he finally woke up, his heart jumped out of his boiler. He wasn't in the shed anymore. He was back in the tunnel, and in front of his buffers was a large brick wall with a little window. Hesitantly, he peeked outside, and there stood the Fat Controller. Henry couldn't answer. He could barely speak. He was too frightened and embarrassed. No one didn't say anything either. They just stayed by Henry's side for the rest of the night until he calmed down. Early the next morning, Henry's fire was slow to start, so Montana had to pull his train for him. As he sat for steam to build up, poor Henry still felt tired and upset. Gordon, James, and Emily stood nearby, worried for their friend. Henry told them about his nightmare. The three engines were shocked. Despite himself, Henry managed to put on a little smile as his friends' words sunk in. Later that evening, Henry had a talk with the Fat Controller. A long, friendly, and a reassuring talk that helped ease any other worries Henry might have felt throughout the day. And Henry couldn't help but feel happy.